Hey, how's it going, everybody? Wanted to put a video together here to talk about some aspects of using Git, and this is built on top of a prior video which talks about working in a Unix environment and doing the kinds of things that we do in the operating system: creating files, making directories, moving around directories, deleting files, deleting directories, renaming files and directories, and so on. So this is supposing that you already know how to do these basic operations in the operating system. And I want to talk about where Git comes into this. And so as a reminder, when you log into the Linux machine, you have your home directory, /home/ whatever your username is. And underneath this, you've created a directory called CSE224. And this is the root of all the work you're going to do for this course, CSE224. When you take CSE 222, you'll put another directory under your home called 222. If you're taking 215, you might put a CSE 215 directory, and so on. And underneath CSE 224, we have, for example, a subdirectory called homework002, and underneath that you created a readme.md. And then when you start working on PA1, you're going to make a subdirectory called PA1, and inside that you're going to have a stick.c, and you'll compile it into a stick, and so on. And when you start working on your second programming assignment, you'll have a PA2, and there'll be files underneath that, and so on. And so this whole directory tree sitting underneath CSE 224, that's your course. That's where all the work for your course is going. So we create what's called a Git repository, or a Git repo. And this is basically a clone of this entire directory tree. Since we're trying to clone the tree rooted at here, it's in this CSE224 directory that we're going to say git init. And that's the only place we're saying git init. We don't say it from the home dir, we don't say it from here, or from here, or from here. We want a single repository rooted at CSE224. So that's the first issue. People on homework 2 have been doing git inits from lots of different places. It's not something you can just do just in case it's needed. Every time you say git init, significant things change. So we only want to do a git init from CSE224. And then we do git add, git commit, and that keeps putting things into our repository. We'll talk more about that in a second. But to let me look at your code, to let us talk about code in office hours, to let me grade your code, we need to put your repo into the cloud. So that's where GitLab comes in. And GitLab is just a place where we can store a copy of this repository. And that's what git push does, git push origin master. And once we have this, this repository sitting on GitLab, now I can pull a copy of that into a local Git repo. And from there I can get my own copy of your CSE 224. And now I have access to all the stuff that you've been working on. So if you say, hey, there's something wrong with my stick.c, can you look at it? And we're in office hours, yeah, I can pull down the version that you pushed over, and I can see exactly what you're seeing. So that's the basic setup. So how do we add things to this Git repo? Well, there's this notion of a staging area. And so basically you have files. So here's your Linux server. And yeah, I'm assuming we're just doing this from one machine, which is linuxengrcs.com, so the Linux server. So you have a file, and it's sitting somewhere under CSE 224. What you do is you say git add file, and that pushes it into what's called a staging area. So it's like a little holding area. And you can have multiple files that you git add into the staging area, and now you've got these things ready to get added to your repository. To take these files and put them into your repo, you say git commit. And when you say git commit, these staged files get pushed into the repository. If I make a change to a file, I edit my file, I say git add, and then I say git commit. Now that new change is stored in the repository. So we do this process repeatedly of edit, git add, git commit, And that takes our files and keeps putting them into our local repository. But usually when we put something in our local repository, we also want to push it off into GitLab, and so there's going to be a git push. And there's arguments that go after these. So make changes or create a new file, and then git add, git commit, git push. If I don't say git add, if I just say git commit, well, there's nothing in the staging area. Commit has nothing to commit. If I just say git add, I push them into the staging area, but without git commit, they never end up in the repo. And if I just say git add, git commit, but I don't push, they don't go beyond my repo. They don't end up in GitLab. So it's this constant sequence of, make changes to your files, add, commit, push. Add, commit, push, add, commit, push. Just keep doing that over and over and over again. All right, so that's the basic setup. So let's go through some examples of doing this, and I'll use the examples from homework 2. I'll go through this pretty quickly, but it's a video, so you can go back and rewatch and so on and so forth. So I'm going to log into the server, and I'm going to start off with an empty setup, so I got nothing on here. But I've already done those initial git things, the git config statements where we specify our username, our email, and our editor. So those have already taken place. If I say ls-a, I'll see a file called .gitconfig. That's what you get when you do those git config commands. And if I just cat out the contents of this, I can see my username, my email, and my choice of editor. But I don't see a directory called .git, right? .git gets created when I make a Git repository, and I don't want to make a Git repository in my login directory. So what do we want to do? We want a CSE224 directory, so make dir CSE224. And then I want to work from that directory, so current directory CSE224. And I can see in my prompt right here, that's my directory, but I could also say print working directory to confirm that I'm inside CSE224. Alright, so far so good. So, let's do our git init. So I'm just going to say git init. And bang, we're done. And it tells me, hey, I created a repository in here. So I don't see anything if I say ls. If I say ls-a, there's the thing that tells me I've done a git init. Alright, so let's make a homework 002 directory, and let's cd into homework 002, and let's make a readme.md. And there's a useless comment which says this is a readme. Alright, so I want to add that file to my repository. What am I going to do? I'm going to say git add, git commit, git push. Don't forget though, there's this one-time setup, and it only happens one time. When you start a repository, you have to do that git remote add origin. So this is not something you're going to do more than once. But I'm going to go into the root of the directory where my git repository is. That's CSE224. I'm going to say git remote add origin git at gitlab.com :username / CSE224.git. And you got to spell it correctly. Alright, and that's a one-time thing. And this is all supposing you've gone through the how-to guide and you've set up your SSH key pair and copied your ID rsa.pub to GitLab. So this is where most people are. They've gone through those steps, but things are getting tangled up somewhere. Alright, so I'm going to go back into my homework 002. I've got a file called readme. If I say git commit, it's going to say, hey, there's nothing to commit. Right? You haven't done anything. So what do I do? Git add, git commit, git push. So git add readme, git commit, and this is initial readme file, and then git push origin master. And if everything works the way it's supposed to, hey, you're all set, right? So now I can go to my GitLab page, and I've already logged in as my username, and if I go to the dashboard, I will see CSE224. If I click on that, there's a homework 002 directory, and if I look at that, there's a readme file. And so now if I make a change to my README, let's edit my README file again. I should say something more in here. What do I do? Git add, git commit, and I'll just say added more lines, and then git push origin master. Alright, now if I go back to my homework 002, there's a README and it says this is a README, I should say something more, I should say something more in here, and so on. I was last committed just now. Alright, so this is a way to track my changes. And as I make changes to my files over here, I push those out to the repo and they're always there. So let me make a new file. This is new. I can git add new file, git commit, adding a new file, git push origin master, and now go back over here and let me just refresh the page, and I have two files in my repo, readme and new file. And if I look at new file, it says this is new. Alright, so that's your basic chain of operations. And so if I want to add, say, a new directory, say PA1, what do? Well, I go back to my Linux system, and let's go back into CSE224, and let's make dir PA1. And I'll go into PA1 and I'll initialize stick.c. And I'll put a semi-real comment here. And maybe I'll make a make file. We'll talk about make files another. But I've got some stuff in here, right? And so I want to add this to my GitLab setup. Now if I go over here and I just look at CSE224, all I got is homework 002. So I can be a little reckless and I can just say git add star and git commit and started PA1 project and git push origin master. And now if I come over here and I take another look at CSE224, let me come up here. Right, now I've got a PA1 as well as a homework 002. And if I go inside PA1, there's my make file, there's my stick.c. And as I keep making changes to my files, I'm just going to keep adding, committing, and pushing. Add, commit, push, add, commit, push. Do it over and over and over again. And it's totally free, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of extra thought. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. You just do this, while you're working on your project. And the cool thing is that as you do this, it's keeping a history of everything that you've done. And I can go back to previous versions of my project. If I made some changes I didn't mean to make, I can go back and see older versions and so on. But mostly you're just doing this just to keep things in sync in the cloud. It's a good backup, and then eventually when I'm ready to grade, I'll go ahead and pull down the repository, and I have an exact copy of what you had. Alright, so that's the basic setup with Git. So what can go wrong? And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with Git. But here's the most common situation is you have, say, your Linux server, and you've got CSE224, and you've got a repository sitting on your Linux server, and you're pushing this over to GitLab, and maybe you've got, a laptop, and that laptop has its own copy of CSE224, which you've been pushing into a repository. And maybe, you're working on the Linux server, you're pushing things into GitLab, and at some point you start working on your laptop, and you want to take what you've done on your laptop and push that over to GitLab. It's possible for these two repositories to conflict with each other. And if you try to do something that the system cannot unambiguously decide what you're trying to do, it will start complaining about things like merging or what it calls fast forwarding. And this can get you all tangled up. So let me show you what can go wrong. Let me show you how you can try to resolve it, and then let me show you the absolute nuclear solution to just totally start over again if all else fails. So let's look first of all at what can go wrong. So you know, I've got my repository on GitLab. This is being pushed over from the Linux machine. Let me go into my local system here, and let me start a second copy of the repository. So I'm just gonna make a directory called temporary, and I'm going to say git clone git at gitlab.com /nmacias /cse224.git. And this is going to pull down the repository. Oh, I've got to give myself permission. This is going to pull down the repository from GitLab and make a copy of it in here. But remember, when you first do this, you have to go ahead and you have to add me as a reporter. So look for Nick Macias and give me reporter access and say invite. Alright, so now if I try to clone that repository into my laptop, I can do that, and guess what? I've got a CSE224 and I've got my two subdirectories under there. Alright, so this is great. I've got a copy sitting on the Linux server here, and I've got a copy sitting here. Alright, so maybe I've done that, and now on the Linux server, let's say let's go into the PA1 subdirectory. I'm in the PA1 subdirectory. So let me make some changes to stick.c. So I've written some code now, and I'm going to add that, commit it, started the real code, git push origin master. Alright, so we've done this before, right? Now suppose, you know, I come back the next day and I'm on my Linux machine and I say, okay, I'm going to make some changes to my repository. So let me add a README in here. This is the main dir for PA1. And I git add and I git commit. Alright, there's a problem here. So the problem is that, you know, just a moment ago or maybe yesterday, I added some more code to stick.c. And so I've got a stick.c, a new version of it that I pushed to my repo. But on my laptop, I have the old stick.c. And on my laptop, I have a new README. If I try to push from my laptop into the repo, yeah, it'll take the new README and push that over there, but my old version of stick.c will conflict with that new version of stick.c. In other words, these repositories are out of sync. I cloned this into my laptop, that was great. And then I made a change here, but I didn't mimic that change here, so now I had two different versions of my repository. I pushed this version to GitLab. Now I'm trying to make changes here and push that over. Well, I'm starting with two things that aren't the same. And the system is going to get upset at me for that. So what's going to happen is, from my laptop, I've added a new file, README. I've committed it. I'm going to say git push origin master. And it's going to say, oh, I need write access to it also. Hold on, back up. Let me change this to second. Let's invite member. And I'm going to set this person up as an owner. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and git push origin master. And I'm going to get this problem where it says failed to push some references. Updates were rejected because the remote contains work that you do not have locally. In other words, there's this new version of stick.c over here that I don't have on my local machine. And if I just push this over to GitLab, I'm going to overwrite that new version of stick with my old version of stick. So things are out of sync. And you'll see references to that, so note fast forwards and so on and so forth. You may want to first integrate the remote changes git pull. And this is exactly the way to deal with this. So git pull origin master. So before I do this, let's take a look at stick.c. It's that one line. So I'm going to say git pull origin master. And it's going to give me a default message. But now if I look at stick.c, it's the version that was pushed over from the server. So now my stick.c matches, and now my repository is in sync except for, this new readme file. So now I can say git push origin master. And that should succeed. And now if I look at my project, CSE224, and I go under PA1, it's got the readme that I just created from my laptop, and it's got the new version of stick.c. Now if I go back to the server and I look in there, there's no readme. And if I don't synchronize this with GitLab, I'm going to have the same problem. So before I make any changes, I'm going to say git pull origin master. And now if I do an ls, I've got a readme. And now I can make changes and push them over and so on. So the easiest way to avoid this is stick to a single copy of your repository. For example, just work on the Linux server and just keep pushing your code over from there. And then if you want to do local work, maybe use SFTP to just pull it down, but not under Git control. Make your changes and then push those changes back to the server with SFTP and then do your Git commands from the server. That's the easiest way to avoid it. But Git is made to support multiple copies of the repository with, actually multiple people working on it doing their own thing. And so you can do this, but you have to remember before you start making changes, do a git pull origin master to make sure your local repository is in sync with what's in GitLab. If you do that, everything should work great. All right. If none of that works, you can do a big reset. And to do a big reset, I'm assuming I've got a repository that is actually what I want, but it's not playing well with Git. And so this is a very heavy-handed option, but you can do this worst case, and it will get you back to the beginning. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to GitLab and I'm going to delete my project. So I'm going to go under CSE224. I'm going to go under Settings. I'm going to go down to the bottom where it says Advanced. I'm going to go to the bottom of that. I'm going to say Delete Project. It'll ask me to type in this line, which I will copy and paste and say delete the project. And that's it. It's gone from GitLab. There's no undelete. It's gone. Right? If I look at my dashboard, CSE224 is my only project. Not there anymore. Okay, let's say I want to bring my Linux server back into a situation where everything is the way I expect it to be. So go into the root directory, and if I do an ls-a, there's the .git. That's my local repository. If I just remove -rf.git, and you got to do this really carefully, right? I'm no longer under Git control, right? If I say git status, there's no Git repository. So now I can do git init, git remote add origin, git at gitlab.com:/CSE224.git. And now I'm just going to say git add star, git commit. My comment is I reset everything, git push origin master. And that should push everything over into GitLab. And it'll take a little while depending on how much stuff you have. And now if I come over here and I look at my dashboard, I've got a nice clean repository. The reason you don't want to do that is, one, you lose all of your history, all of your different versions and so on and so forth. And two, if you mess up, you can lose everything. So this is a really heavy-handed solution. Your best option is not to make this necessary at all by never making a mistake. That's not easy to do. Your second best option is to fix those errors by doing things like a git pull before you do a push. But as a final resort, you can always do this. And if you're going to do this, my recommendation is, make a copy of everything first. So from my home directory, I can say copy CSE224, CSE224 -backup. And now I have, an exact clone of everything in CSE224 before I start doing these kinds of things. And the problem is, if you do this in the wrong directory or you mess something up, bad things can happen. So for example, if I say rm-rf star.c, but I accidentally hit a space instead of a dot, right? I've just wiped out my entire directory tree, right? I'm in my home directory, I have no files. Everything is gone, no backup, nothing. Unless I got stuff on Git or a flash drive, I'm back to day one of the course. So be really, really careful doing commands like this. They can bite hard if you're not careful. Now, if you're using Git, right? Git clone git at gitlab.com /nmacias CSE224.git. And hey, guess what? My CSE224 is back. And it's got my subdirectories and everything like that. So Git can hurt you, but it can also save you. Alright, that's all I got. Thanks.